Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a very interesting webinar. My name is Antriksh, and I'm part of the Nullcon team. We, the geeks, nerds, hackers, technocrats, are fully aware that every technology has weaknesses, and there are various security solutions out there to fix them. But we still fall prey to our own laziness and commitment to our products and services. Nullcon is trying its bit to create a platform where communities and industry can collaborate, share knowledge and learnings with each other. We are also having our upcoming hands-on security training scheduled next month in an online mode. Those who are interested, please have a look at the link that we would be posting on the Zoom chat later. Our today's webinar is one dedicated such mission that we have to ensure and encourage end-to-end encrypted communication. We have Jim, who's the Vice President of Signal Messaging app today with us. His talk title is Pushing Private and Secure Communication Forward. Jim is going to walk through us the engineering life on various new approaches for securing calling, storage, and messaging apps. For those who are new to Nullcon webinars, if you have any questions, please type them in the Zoom chat below. We will have 10 minutes dedicated time after Jim finishes his presentation to answer Q&A. Jim, let's have you on stage.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Jim, we can hear you perfectly fine.
Perfect. I will share my screen here. And also, thank you. Okay. Well, good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world right now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jim O'Leary, as Ankrich mentioned there. Some people know me as Jimmy O. That's my Twitter handle. That was my kind of hacker nickname early on. And as Ankrich mentioned, I run engineering at Signal. And I'm here to talk about some of the things we've been working on lately. I joined the organization in October of last year, and since then we've released a lot of things. And so I'm hoping to cover more breadth than depth right here, but we can go deeper on anything that interests folks as we get moving along here. But in place of a bio or a lengthy personal introduction, I figured I would start with a little bit of the tale that brings me here today, not just to Signal, but to Nullcon as well. And so in the late 90s, early 2000s, America Online or AOL Instant Messenger were how many of the folks in my social circle and community were connecting. I was getting into computer security in high school and things like that. Partway through college, I applied for an internship on the security team at AOL, and I luckily landed it. Learned a lot of stuff over the course of the summer, went back to school, graduated, and ended up at Microsoft in the early 2000s. So this was a great place to get a security education at the time. This is the days of SQL Slammer, MS Blaster, Code Red. You know, fuzzing was taking off, static analysis was getting kicked off. And so it was a great place to go from undergrad to kind of big software engineering organization. There's also an international organization. And so this being Nullcon, I know we're doing a webinar now, but I had the chance to go to Hyderabad, do a 2-week security push there, visit Charminar. And originally, I understand this is scheduled to be like a global conference in Goa. I know the world is in a state right now where can't do that necessarily. I hope sometime in the future I'll be able to come see you all and hang out for a bit. But after Microsoft, a little bit more school, startup life started calling. I joined Twitter when it was a few hundred people. That brought me down to Silicon Valley. That was a wonderful ride. From there, right down the street, was Facebook. I joined the Facebook security team for some number of years there, ran a couple teams. I probably interacted with some folks in the call today as part of the bug bounty and some other security research we did with folks. This is also where I met Oshkosh for the first time. So this is back 5 years or so now. Some of the Nullcon organizers came by Facebook. We ate some delicious food, but it was an opportunity to make some connections that persist to this day. And of course, Facebook wasn't just Facebook. The security team had this breadth of scope that went through, the main Facebook app, but also WhatsApp, Instagram, Messenger, Oculus, all the properties as well. And so that then brings me to Signal, right? And so this is a much smaller, fully distributed organization with a collection of folks that I've worked with in the past from the security community. So, Moxie Marlinspike is our CEO and a co-founder of the foundation, along with Brian Acton, who is one of the WhatsApp co-founders. And Trevor Perrin is the kind of co-author of the Signal protocol. All still here, all actively participating in the day-to-day of building Signal. And so with that, I want to kind of frame it for folks that might not know what we are or what we do here. And so we're a nonprofit organization, and we are building open source privacy tools to protect free expression and enable secure global communication. So that is what we've got up on the website as the mission for Signal. And so I mentioned open source. We've got a very active collection of public code repositories. And so we share our code publicly on GitHub and keep it all up to date with basically every release we do. So you'll see here, these are our 3 main client apps. We have a desktop app that is written in Electron. And so it kind of compiles in 3 different ways for Mac, Windows, and Linux. And then we've got our big iOS and Android apps as well. And we also open source the server-side component. So this is maybe what also makes Signal unique, is this full commitment to transparency and this desire to have you all be part of what we're building here too. So I know there are other places that'll open source bits and pieces of their infrastructure, or little bits and tools and things here. We commit to what we build, we'd like to share. And it's not just the code that we like to share. If you go to signal.org/docs, we share our specs as well. And if you haven't used Signal itself yet, I encourage you to, but if you haven't, there's a good chance that you use the Signal protocol sometime today already. So all messages sent on WhatsApp are end-to-end encrypted by default with the Signal protocol. And as a nonprofit organization, one thing I really enjoy about kind of the mission we have and what we're building here is that we don't have competitors in the traditional sense. We'd love for people to use Signal, but our main competitors are just like insecure technology, SMS, MMS, plain text protocols. And we win when the world adopts technology that is more private and secure. So I'll get into what we've been building, some details on the tech, but I want to talk a little bit about, the how we run our organization. I feel like that is also interesting, and something that drew me to Signal was this unique approach to not just building a product, but running an organization as well too. So not too long ago, I started reading this book. It's 500 pages or so long. It's delightfully written. It's almost poetic at times. But Professor Zuboff here talks about the business model of a lot of modern tech companies. And that business model can sort of be simplified to a phrase that says, data is the new oil. In the modern times, data is the most valuable asset in the world. And data may be this asset that's to be mined, harvested, distributed, monetized. And it gets you thinking a little bit, oil brings about evolutions in power, it brings about revolutions in transportation. It enables this global economy, all incredible things that I couldn't imagine modern life without. But you also get to thinking at the same time, it's not without its perils, right? Intentionally or unintentionally, oil can leak. Similarly, unintentionally or intentionally, data can leak from systems or companies. And there's this residual impact that it has on the environment around it. And so similarly, some of these systems and maybe ecosystems that get touched by data are polluted by it. And it sometimes has unintended side effects or victims when things go wrong. And so, thinking about this and stretching the metaphor a little bit further, what if we could be part of another revolution? What about something different, something refreshing, something sustainable? And that's where we are now with this nonprofit open source organization. So we're a registered 501c3 nonprofit, And I mentioned this before, we commit to open source technology because we want to give to the world while actively participating in it too. And typically when you're in a business model that's monetizing data, you usually advertise, right? Like you've got this data, you sell targeted advertising, which is the way that advertising typically does best. So to get these relevant ads, they'll often try to figure out who in the world is be a member of this audience that listens to heavy metal and Taylor Swift and lives in California and wakes up early to present at security webinars on Saturday mornings. That may be a very targeted set of folks that will be clicking on your advertisements. And so without this sort of business model maybe influencing the decisions of the organization, we are still able to provide a free service for everybody. We are funded by grants and donations by people like you, people like myself, that power the services and pay for the benefits and the salaries for the small set of folks that work here. And we're structured in a way such that we aren't tied to kind of big tech today, and we can't be acquired by big tech tomorrow either. So another common path for data in this current economy is build something that's really cool, generate a lot of data, and then get acquired by a place that's really interested in that data. So I want to say that Signal now is for everyone. It's kind of by everyone, for everyone. But to talk about maybe what brought me to Signal in the first place, or what brought some folks here to Signal in the first place. Many years ago, this product started off as an open source project called TechSecure. And I joined for reasons similar to the following, right? Like there's a world-renowned crypto expert that I respected and admired. I myself admired the tech and some of the people working on it. And they're really endorsing the product for the strength of the protocols and the security. I spend time on the business model here, though, because I think now more than then, it's not necessarily just what we're building, but how we're building it, right? And so the fact that we're built in the open source, peer-reviewed, funded entirely by grants model, that to me is more interesting from like a long-term perspective than just the crypto and the keys and all those kind of things too. So I've made it this far now with actually talking about what Signal actually is, or showing it to you in the sense of like what you might see on your mobile devices. And you've likely seen it before. We are a rich private communication app. We have features like disappearing messages, GIFs, video, voice notes, stickers. And one thing I want to talk about to get started here is calling. So I mentioned TechSecure, which was what the product was known as when I first signed up for it. There was also a kind of side-by-side product called Redphone that offered encrypted calling. And so when I mentioned kind of like this history of TechSecure or the Signal protocol, there's a really tight association with Signal and end-to-end encrypted chats. And some people don't even realize that we have calling inside the Signal product. We'll tweet these announcements of new things that we're launching, and people will be like, when are you going to add calling to Signal? And it's like, it's been there for a number of years, actually. And I mentioned before, I joined in October of last year. This is a project I've been fortunate to be a part of. And we began working on probably August 2019 before I joined, but it's Ring RTC. And so this is the encapsulation of our calling code, again, open source. But what we do here is for WebRTC. So this is the big open source project that a lot of products will build atop of to offer calling or video calling. We modify it to lock it down a little bit more, make some explicit privacy or security decisions, and open source our fork of WebRTC. Then we wrap that all in Rust. And so this is a direction that we're taking as an engineering organization or a company, is to move things to the Rust programming language for memory safety and type safety. And this gives us all a consistent interface between all of our clients. And so prior to this project, all of our clients, so like iOS and Android, each pulled in WebRTC in their own way and had their own interfaces to it. And that led to different implementations between the clients. Sort of out of sync versions of libraries and things like that. And also made it such that when we started to work on desktop calling, we'd have to do all that all over again. And so now we've got a calling team that works on this one sort of like abstract layer to calling interfaces. And it's a thing that if you look at our open source repositories, you'll see, continuous active development on there as we get closer to, I said, not just desktop calling or better calling across all of the clients that we release, but just like a more minified set of calling code and things like that too. So if I could thematically describe the engineering work we've done over the past 9 or 10 months or so, it's to make sure the systems we're building and the code that we're writing is secure, reliable, and fast. And so if you've ever had somebody work on your house or fix your car, there's this sort of like, pick 2 out of 3. You can have something be done cheap, fast, good. You can't have all those things. You can have it done cheap and fast, but then it won't be good. You can have it done good and fast, but then it won't be cheap. And sometimes there are these trade-offs that you've got to make when you're designing systems. We don't want to sacrifice on any of these things, basically. And so with the design of a lot of the distributed architecture of Signal originally, there's more we could do to make it just more reliable and faster. And so late last year, we released a kind of white paper and proof of concept implementation of some improvements that we're making to groups. And so groups are one of the biggest reasons people use Signal. It's very popular for one-on-one conversations, but there are maybe 2 or 3 people I talk to every day, just one-on-one. And then there are lots of people that I talk to in a collection every day. And so my Signal groups are much more active than my one-on-one chats are. And the traditional design of the kind of V1 versions of groups that exist in the product right now is very distributed. And, Signal doesn't know who's in a group, who's setting what the group's about, what the avatar is. And we want to maintain that principle, but also make it such you can do things like, kick somebody out of a group, have an admin in a group, and all these other kind of things, which are very difficult to achieve in a fully distributed system. And so, again, this is open source tech. Here is our implementation. It's Rust once again. So I'll mention that this is a kind of engineering direction that we're taking going forward. If you're listening and wondering what programming languages you might want to get into to be part of this movement, I recommend Rust. I recommend TypeScript, Swift, all these other kind of things that we're actively developing in. But here, again, we take the crypto specifics of this new approach to group management, and we wrap that all in one library. It's a layer that's implemented once and correctly and consistently across all the clients, and gives us this move to more abstract, more encapsulated code. And along with this, we also released this white paper. We're going to share this in some upcoming conferences and other places to get peer reviewed. To go back to that quote about we want to do these things in the open. We win when the world adopts what we build, and there's best when they're contributed to from inside and outside the organization, and that we want to continue to collaborate with people. So if you read the blog post, that's a nice start. If you want to jump into 40 pages of crypto proofs and system design, we make that available for you all too. And so on the topic of reliability and speed, brings me to pins and secure value recovery. So this is a topic of recent discussion. It's quite active on the Twitter sphere, but our commitment to open sourcing the tech and the protocols as we go here, this is something that we open sourced and announced in December of last year, began rolling out sort of incrementally in January. And then, just over the past couple of weeks, it's been a topic of discussion. We said Moxie's Twitter feed has been quite active. I've seen a little bit of that and kind of jumped in and talked through things too. But the blog post we have, not just ours, but Matt Green's, I think, is also pretty reasonable and a nice kind of metered approach to discussing the design of systems here and the trade-offs we might make. But it's more complex and nuanced than Signal now storing your data behind a pin or something like that. So I will hesitate to go through all the details here, but I will describe it at like a high level, where what we do is we prompt people for a pin, so something that they will remember. And then we use this for basically like key stretching, essentially. So we use Argon 2, which is one of these recent winners of a public hashing competition. The title of the talk is Pushing Private Communication Forward. And so as a result, we love to be not just early adopters, but early encouragers of the modern tech. And so this is, you think about some of the previous hashing algorithms and stuff like that. You go back to like MD5 and SHA-1 and these things that, there've been proven collisions in and maybe you don't want to have in your code base anymore. This isn't exactly the same use case as straight up hashing, but anyways, we pick this library. We had to write some wrappers so that we could integrate it into our code base and use that for turning your PIN into a 32-byte key. There's been discussion on our use of Intel's SGX platform for secure enclaves here too. And so again, more details in the write-ups, but it's more nuance than just saying, we're taking your data and we're throwing it into SGX. SGX is used to prevent us from storing any data to disk in this current system, right? So like this is a system architected on top of SGX, but it's this multi-provider distributed replica system where what we use SGX for is this like secure enclave encrypted memory space that we then use solely so that things don't get written to disk. So that we can prevent sort of any offline analysis of this encrypted data. And then we go even further to do these like binary rewrites on the kind of programs that we're shipping that power this thing, such that we're disabling like speculative execution paths on the binary as it's running in the systems and stuff like that too. So one other thing that we get from this is remote attestation. So we publicly share the code. We share the hashes of the code. These are signed, and then the clients themselves will sort of do signature verification that the code running on the service is what we have published and are sharing and things like that too. So, we want our code to be auditable. We want it to be visible to folks. And on the server side, sometimes it's difficult to provide those guarantees, and this sort of signed hashing and remote attestation is one thing that gives us that. So again, please read before you tweet on the PIN stuff, but we really welcome the conversation as well too. This is why we kind of release the specs, we release the code, then we start integrating it into the platform. Another thing we shipped probably last month or so was another sort of move towards that resilience of the platform and the data. And this is one that will allow you to transfer much more data than pins will or anything like that. So this is a local device-to-device iOS transfer. We didn't have this before. Android had a means for doing kind of local backup for years, but we just didn't have it available to us in iOS for some time. We've got another blog post that describes this in more detail. But we have this end-to-end encrypted transfer that kind of generates a unique key pair when you start up this little session, and allows you to take a kind of, maybe like a broken iPhone 4 or something like that, and transfer your data, including messages here and all these other things that we do not back up or store with pins, to another device. So this is kind of just like a clean copy from one device to another. Not what pins are designed to do, and not what we want to get sort of any of this like cloud stuff involved in either, right? So this is just a local device-to-device transfer. So I mentioned secure, reliable, and fast. And I think that those are great ways to build systems, and it's where we're heading as an engineering organization for design. But you also need to think about the product too, right? Like Signal needs to be more than just sending encrypted blobs back and forth to your security friends. There's a little bit of a joke in the security community from a way back about dancingcats.exe being the like the one thing that nobody can ever pull themselves away from. You'd be like, oh, you teach everybody not to click on links on email. You say, don't download attachments, but then dancingcats.exe arrives in your mailbox and you just got to click. And so we recognize, people are pulled to Dancing Cats. Let's be able to give it to everybody in a more secure fashion. And so we introduced stickers on Signal a little whiles back. This is probably December of last year. But Signal being Signal, we did so in a Signal type of way, right? So this isn't just stickers as you might know them in any other application. Similar to the messages and attachments and other things you send around, we don't get to see what stickers you're sending, what stickers you've got installed, what the contents of a sticker pack are, or anything like that too. So we design even things like stickers with security and privacy in mind, which I feel sets us apart as an organization and a product from a lot of the other kind of offerings in the world. And it's just this push for, minimal data available to the services and encrypted end-to-end data flowing for the people that use Signal. We also added emoji. So this is reaction. So emoji were already there, as were kind of, big emoji type things, but we didn't have the ability to react to a message, which is something that you'll see in Messenger, Slack, all these other applications. And we don't want people to have to sort of sacrifice usability for security. So this is kind of this push we had where it's like, people are using these other applications because they're maybe a little bit more fun, or they can feel productive in some certain way that they didn't feel on Signal. So we again took, the approach of, all right, private secure communication, how would we do this? And then build these other more fun features. Similar to other messages that get sent through Signal, these are end-to-end encrypted. We began with a small set, the kind of little bit right there, and then continue to roll that out as we expanded the feature. We'll do more work on this and things like this as well too, going forward. And then maybe lastly here, Signal has had disappearing messages and timers for a while. So you can truly treat Signal as you might a conversation like this if it weren't being recorded, or we go to a coffee shop and have a conversation where not everything you say to everybody needs to be persisted in both of your devices for eternity, right? So we've got this opportunity, or we got this feature that'll allow you to turn on, per chat, keep my messages around for a week in a group or in a one-on-one conversation. And that's great. Some people use that exclusively for their Signal usage. I talked to a lot of people that just have that applied to every conversation they do, and that's fine. Like I said before, we want to become a parallel to communications you can have in person. But we also added recently this notion of disappearing media. So you might want to just send video or a picture once and not have that stick around forever, but without having to go change the conversation settings for the whole entire conversation or the whole group. And so we had disappearing messages, now we got disappearing media. And so I mentioned my trip back to Hyderabad in 2007. I took this photo, and this might be something that I want my friends and I to hold on to forever. This is sort of before the era of selfies. So I felt compelled to take a picture of just a thing without sticking my face in front of the camera. But this is the actual photo from my trip there. I'm like, oh, I should just share this and kind of have it persist. There are number of different photos I probably could have chosen for this particular example of something that I just want to share once. And so I look back on the same camera roll and try to find some things. And I was like, well, how much mango drink did I consume in one day at Microsoft Hyderabad campus? And I don't feel like I'm particularly proud of this amount that I drank, but it's one thing that I might not also want to pollute my friends' devices storage with for the rest of eternity either. So I kind of pick view once, select that, and send it off to my friends in a group. So Signal has always had a place in the world, whether it be the protocol or the organization or the app itself. But lately, more than ever, I feel like we're becoming more important every day. And so it seems as if people need us more than ever. And I just want to say we're listening and we're ready to go and build what you all need. In the US and across the world, there are these movements for justice that we support. We want people to be heard. We want people to be safe. And a thing that's happening, at least over here, is that photos are being taken and shared on social media during some of these gatherings. People are being identified. They're being doxxed. They're being put in jail. Worse things are happening. So we recognized this was happening. We talked to some people that were organizing these things out in the streets. And we shipped this local on-device only using system APIs, kind of face rec and auto blurring feature in an effort to be helpful to the people that were coming to Signal for the first time or had been using it for a while to organize. And so it's a really rewarding opportunity to get to do this stuff in almost real time. We see the Signal growth numbers increase as we see things happening around the world. But to also be able to quickly, as a small team, turn around and ship something on like this has been really, really rewarding, and I feel quite proud to be a part of. a very interesting dynamic I will share being part of Signal is that there's this asymmetry. Like, we're a small nonprofit organization that a lot of the security and privacy research community has their eyes on. And so we'll ship something like this to help people. Security researchers will write into us asking us the parameters of our Gaussian blur methods and forwarding us 40-page academic papers on reverse engineering machine language models, or not machine language models, but machine learning models, which is all really interesting stuff. I think that we strive to be better each day, and we welcome that feedback. I just want to share a little bit of that insider perspective on, always having the kind of magnifying glass of the security community on us is both liberating and at times pressing, I will say. But I enjoy really having that community supporting us and questioning the things that we're building so that we guarantee that we get it right. We talked about encryption and security and all this kind of stuff, but didn't really touch on the why as much. And it does come back to that initial little bit I had on the data. It's about your data. It's about protecting your data. It's not your data. No, it is your data. It's not our data. And some services that don't have the same system designs as we do and don't have end-to-end encrypted technology are forced to make some challenging policy decisions when they need to decide how to share this data that they've collected, right? So this can be things like which employees need to access the data, what internal systems should have access to the data. Then it gets kind of extrapolated out, what advertisers should have access to this data, what law enforcement and what government should have access to it. We still strive to be minimalist. And with that, we get to kind of tweet things like this when other things are happening in the world where, these places make decisions that I respect can be difficult to make about stopping handing over data to particular countries or organizations. We find it's best to be in a position where that data isn't available for us to hand over. And that's why we strive to be minimalist and do right by the people that build and use Signal. And with that, I want to say thank you. Not just for the opportunity to speak with you today. I know that we're virtual and hopefully I can make it out to see you all in person sometime once the world stabilizes a little bit more. But thank you for the time. Thank you for the feedback on Signal. And also ask you to contribute. So I mentioned this before, we're open source. You can be part of what we're building here. All you need is a GitHub account. Depending on the project, there are some things you could do to get started, whether you're a kind of master engineer or just entering university and writing some code for the first time. You can check the contributing markdown files in every project for how to get started. And as we sort of foster this community more going forward, we'll have some ideas for work you could all do to help us out and contribute to my next little bit here, building something. And I want to challenge folks here that might be accustomed to the typical security conference track of 0 days and pwning and exploits and master hackery and stuff like that to like build something. And so I kind of started my security career as this hacker and kind of more of a breaker than a builder. But I've found that the experience of building a tech that somebody's going to use gives you a lot more empathy towards the folks that are trying to build and defend these systems, but also makes you a better breaker or hacker as well. So I welcome you all to come to the other side for a little bit and build with us and be part of this movement. And, find ways to bring the non-technical people onto Signal and join us as well too. So security and privacy shouldn't just be for the technical elite. And I think that was historically, not just from a messaging perspective, but from an all-around security community perspective, how the tech has gone. I mentioned sort of my days at Twitter. I feel quite proud of the fact that I got to work on some of this movement of the web from HTTP to HTTPS everywhere. You kind of go back and look at some of the talks I had from that era. But this is kind of like my next step on that journey, to be honest, is that I feel there's more we can do for the kind of whole tech ecosystem to move in a direction where we're protecting people's data. And that's why I joined this organization and want to be part of what we're building here. And so you can help us, contribute some code, review our code, but also bring your friends and family to Signal so that this becomes a technology for everybody. And so with that, I think I did okay on the timing I had initially expected I would take to talk. I think, Chris, you were saying we could open it up for some questions or things like that.
Yeah. So guys, if y'all have questions, please type in the chat and Jim would answer. I have received one question privately. That is, yeah. Uh, about, do you have any public records of which government has requested for data, and it says which is the government that has the highest number of requests?
So this is easy to answer. If you go to signal.org, excuse me as I type just to make sure I get the URL right, but I believe it's signal.org/bigbrother. We publish any requests that we get that we actually take action on. And so I believe, to answer your question on which government has requested the most that we've honored, it's the United States with 1. And so there is 1 entry up here from 2016 that we share what we shared with the government in that case. And so that is the sort of easy answer and a accurate answer that reflects the organization and the design of the systems too.
Okay, there's another question. Signal does not support two-factor authentication. Is there a move to secure it or use it in the future? I'm not very sure about that.
Yeah, what's interesting about two-factor, and I can share some tales in building Twitter's two-factor, which didn't exist when I was there, but Signal also doesn't have passwords, right? So this is the thing, there's sort of almost no factor in some ways, right? So like you register with a kind of this token that is unique to the ecosystem, right? You've got a mobile device, you can only register with a mobile device or a phone number right now. And you don't pick a password, you don't get prompted for a password or anything like that. So in place of a secondary credential, we don't provide it for like logging in. Like once you're on Signal, you're on Signal. We do have these it's like screen lock that you can do on a platform that then would force you to unlock with a PIN or something like that locally. But I would be curious in like understanding more how two-factor might play into the system like this, where we don't have passwords or we don't have anything like that to rely on.
Okay. There's another question about contributing code. I have seen few pull requests being accepted, even small bugs fixed. Why?
Yeah. So our kind of, it's been an interesting arc from an open source perspective. So I joined the kind of organization. It was probably like 15 people total. And that was before, in the days before that, it was like 2 to 3 full-time, 7 total or something like that. So Signal's been quite small. I'd say that we're a small but mighty organization. Our commitment to open source in the past has been, a big community, but also more on the spirit of just operating out in the open, right? And so like the transparency has been more of the open source pitch, maybe for the past year or so. I'd like for us to get more active, working with the community. We just need to kind of build that bandwidth up. The difficult thing to do is to make it such that the code fits the rest of the coding, like guidelines and styles with the rest of the project, such that it, Signal still feels good from a product perspective. It still runs great, secure, fast, reliable, and talking about the code. And it's hard sometimes when you get a lot of different like artists painting the same picture, right? So I think if we can kind of maybe draw a few more lines around like where we need the help best, that would be the approach to getting more contributions from the open source community. But, I've been with the org for a little bit less than a year now. We've been working on various things. This is a future direction that I want to encourage more and more too, as we grow a little bit more to be able to support that work too.
There's another question, Jim. Can a person be geo-tracked while making phone calls over Signal?
Can they be tracked, you said?
Geo-tracked?
So we have an option for always relaying your calls. I believe once you establish a call with somebody who's, like in your contacts, that's kind of like peer-to-peer, right? So I wouldn't call it geo-tracked as much as I would call it, this is like the connection that is established between your device and another. And that would be kind of how I describe that. Like, I wouldn't say calling could allow you to just track somebody's location all over the place, but recognize also, once the protocols connect, you're talking directly with somebody encrypted, but that means you need to kind of have your device send bits to their device, which means it needs to route through the internet and things like that too. But there is a setting for always relaying calls. Again, it just sort of impacts the reliability and speed and quality of a call.
All right. So Tarun thanks you for an amazing talk. And he has a question. How has the experience been in Signal, especially around security libraries primitives?
So what's interesting about, working at Signal is, everybody really has a strong sense of security and privacy being very, very important to the organization and the product. So the respect to like primitives and libraries, we have these open source libraries for the most kind of like complex bits of the protocol. So libsignal protocol Java, libsignal protocol C, libsignal protocol JavaScript, and those are all abstracted away from the engineers that are writing the code day to day. If you think about kind of like application security or product security, there's the crypto, which is one layer, and this is where kind of Trevor and Moxie and these world-class cryptographers do the system designs, and we put that into one place so that engineers don't need to implement that on their own and even understand like the deepest recesses of the crypto happening at that place. And this mention of like Ring RTC, the ZK group, some other things that we're doing in the future are going to take other bits that aren't just the crypto, as I mentioned, like calling logic and things like that, and put that into one place. It's also abstracted and encapsulated and written in a secure programming language. It's a little bit different operating in our organization. I mentioned before, part of Facebook that has like 50,000 full-time employees and tens and thousands of engineers and 2,000 interns that come by every summer and write code. There, we had a team, it was called Secure Application Frameworks, and the challenges were a lot different. You needed to secure code at scale, not just the size of the code base, which was much, much bigger, but the size of the engineering organization that was contributing to it. And so there was an approach that we took there that is different from what we're taking here, where there'd be these like dangerous APIs that still existed in parts of the code, and we'd like rename those so that they were obviously dangerous, because you couldn't really rely on having somebody with strong security sense code reviewing every commit and every line of code at that scale. So they relied more on automation and kind of the design of the code base in a different way than we've got to do here, because of the sort of the size and the structure of the team is a little bit different.
All right. If anybody else has a question, please send it across over the chat. In the meanwhile, I have one question, Jim. You spoke about trade-offs in the beginning. What are the new features that we would expect in Signal next 5 years? Signal would come up with a virtual conferencing app in the future, like this, what we are currently on, or something that way?
Yeah. I would like there to be a future in which we host this call over Signal. I'll share that. I think it would be earlier than 5 years as well. As for future directions, the way I see it, so this isn't like an organization pitch or line or anything like that, but I want to see Signal, become more of like a fabric of society. So like, right now it's kind of texts and calls and stuff like that. I'd like to see it just sort of like woven into things a little bit more. And that's hard to really describe, but they're all aspects of our modern society that are like insecure or not privacy preserving and things like that too. So I'd like to see us start with this platform of communications and then branch out. And so I won't get into any details of maybe where that might be, but being part of this like mission-driven organization, we're going to continue to find ways, probably beyond just this app, to kind of battle insecurity also. And you might think, like email is not great. Some of these protocols aren't great. Sure, like we could do some work there. I don't think we're going to kind of directly try to tackle that right now. I think the focus is on kind of building what we're building. But again, being sort of this mission-driven org, we're working on, it'll be open source for sure, and it'll be privacy preserving, and it'll be something for everybody to use.
We have one more question. What was your reaction to Zoom's initial decision on not to have end-to-end encryption meetings for free meetings?
Sure. So I said this, in the beginning, Signal is for everyone. Encryption and security and privacy should be for everyone. That is how I feel. I now know a lot of folks that are working on the Zoom security team, and I respect them quite a bit, and I've worked with them in the past. I think that it's an evolution. And so what I have been encouraged to see is like, that's no longer the case. Now it's encryption for everybody all the time, as I understand it. Sometimes you need that feedback from the community to do things correctly. And I'm not gonna, poo-poo an initially wrong decision and take to the Twitterverse to air it out. Because I think we sort of come to appreciate and expect that same sort of like metered discussion about like, maybe you should do it differently, and then having a reasonable discussion and changing and doing things a little bit differently as you move forward. So, initially I was like, wow, this is a busy day on Twitter for Zoom. But I think that they ended up in a good spot eventually. There's a lot of nuance sometimes to rolling out something like encrypted video chat and group chat and stuff like that, particularly when there were probably other things that needed to get worked on. And I think that they're committing to working on those things. I also recall, people criticizing them for their cipher suites and things like that as well. And I think that there were more pressing issues to address than just those.
All right. So that's it, Jim, from the questions. Thank you so much. And thank you for creating such a wonderful app so we all can have encrypted, secure communication among friends, family, everybody else. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you all. I look forward to doing this again sometime soon with even more cool things to talk about.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody else who joined us for today's webinar. We look forward for your feedback and stay safe.